This episode is brought to you by Sunrise Banks and Lifetime. Welcome to another episode of BTT Discussions. This is a very special live in-person podcast episode. We have a guest on the show that I'm extremely excited to interview. We've been having conversations the last couple of years. My business has grown, his business has grown, so I'm very excited to jump into this. Welcome to the show, Jazz.
Appreciate it. Thrilled to be here. I've been a fan of all your work. The content, we were just talking about the content is always on point, so I'm glad to be a part of it today.
Yeah. So tell the audience a little bit about your background, what you do today. We're not going to dive all the way in because we'll build back up to that, but just kind of give a quick intro.
Yeah, so I am one of the three co-founders with two other black men from the Twin Cities of an application, a platform called TurnSignl. When you're pulled over, you press one button, and it instantly connects you to a lawyer while you're in the vehicle and records the interaction. The goal and the mission is simple: to protect your rights, to de-escalate the interaction, and third, most importantly, is make sure everyone gets home safe.
Awesome, much needed. And when you reached out, I think a year or two ago, and told me about it, I loved the idea instantly because I've had many interactions with the police that a platform like that would have been extremely useful for us. So that's dope.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Minnesota is the epicenter for a call for social change. It started here in so many ways. And, I'm a lawyer with my two co-founders, two MBAs. We all kind of have different skill sets. We knew we could come together to build something that really could make a difference.
So dope.
Yeah, and those conversations those were the early conversations.
Yeah.
We were just building it. We were giving you the outline of where we thought it was going to go. Feels like forever ago now.
Yeah, a lot of progress since then. So let's jump back into your journey a little bit. So you just mentioned being a lawyer.
Yeah.
And we part of the reason we do this show is to showcase representation of what we can be, what we can aspire to, and of course the overall topic is technology and our routes to get to this. And so you kind of had a different route into law, but that's also a area where you don't see a lot of us.
Yeah.
So kind of give us a quick overview of what made you want to pursue that, what made you believe that you could do it, and then just kind of some of the trials and tribulations in that journey.
Yeah, so actually it's funny because it did start with technology. So I'm born and raised in the Twin Cities, and speaking of kind of standing out or being sticking out in a room, I transferred from public school to private school when I was in high school. I had a great experience there. I went to Holy Angels. That's when I first started being set in rooms where I looked different than most of the folks. Then I went to the University of St. Thomas, where I studied computer science information systems. That's what my undergrad degree is in.
Nice.
And so I have that degree. I'm not only one of the few people of color at the St. Thomas campus at the time, but I'm also in the computer science department, right?
Yeah.
And so it looks a lot different, right?
Yeah.
And so you narrow it down further and further. To your point, I had braids. I didn't cut my hair for 13 years, and I had braids all the way down my back, beads at the end. I was out here doing it, and I got my first internship at 3M in their web development group. And I went onto the 3M campus. I was 20, 21 years old, and I was one of the only people of color in the building, especially in the web development group or the tech development group. And I had braids, and I remember just thinking, I am sticking out like a sore thumb in here. No one looked like me, and I'm walking down the hallway with beads and braids, or braids with beads in my hair, and it was and I cut my hair that summer, and it was a small example of how I felt like I was trying to conform to fit into the space. But what I didn't realize at the time or appreciate is I should have been owning the space and helping change the way it looks, right? I should have been proud about those braids and really rocked them and said, this is our time to move into this space and really show diversity isn't just a person that looks different that can step into the tech space. It's a person that can bring their authentic self to that tech space, and that's real. But I didn't appreciate it at the time. And so I left. During that summer, I got accepted to law school, and I went straight into law school after undergrad, so I didn't continue working in the tech space. So I've been practicing law for the last 6 years. I started as a public defender when I was in law school. Then I went to a national law firm where I practiced law for 5-6 years. And I was also director of diversity and inclusion, over the 300 employees in 15 states. I was an adjunct professor of law at Mitchell-Hamlin School of Law. And that's really, all of those pieces were small pieces to building towards me having conversations with folks like you, folks like Kamal, and saying, hey, I'm thinking about leaving this and starting something. What does it look like? How do you do it? And finally, the boat got close enough to the dock, and I made the jump. So, and we're here now. I'm excited about it.
So let's back up for a second. So you're at 3M, and then you went to law school. So where did that come into play in your mind? was that always part of the plan? Was there a pivot there?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a pivot. It's like people always have like option A and B, or maybe considering where they'd pivot. And I played football in college, at least for the first year and a half. And then I played rugby. I was the class president my junior and senior year at St. Thomas. I was super involved, like a performing arts club. I did everything.
Okay.
I was like, I was staying busy. But what I loved the most was like the competitive aspects of sports. And I knew I wanted to go into law because, all lawyers were like argumentative when they were younger. But I always say law is like sports and suits. Like my same playlist, like Young Jeezy, Lil Wayne, and like everything that I played before a football game is the same one, like that A$AP Rocky that I drove to court to go sit in front of a judge in the Minnesota, in Hennepin County in Minnesota to make an argument on behalf of my Fortune 5 client, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same feeling, but actually like the win feels better in a courtroom because it's first of all, when you're making that argument, it's like solo. You're doing it by yourself. You feel like, you wrote the thing, you're arguing the thing. You're like, this is my product. And then also it's an intellectual battle. Like, sure, like someone's always going to be stronger than me. But if you can go into a courtroom and win like an argument in front of a judge that's grilling you and then an opposing counsel is arguing against you and you get the dub, it's the best feeling in the world. It absolutely is. And so it's sports and suits. So I knew that I wanted to pursue something like that, and I did. But I always knew that I wanted to do that and then also help the community. To be honest with you, I thought I'd end up in like the Innocence Project or somewhere working to help wrongfully convicted people get out of jail. But the road took me to meet to work with Mike and Dre, my two co-founders, to start TurnSignl. It's just as important work.
Yeah, and you never know what will happen later and how TurnSignl could also impact something like that as well down the road. So
for sure,
you never know, especially with you because you're out here pivoting. So
yeah,
I see it.
yeah. And I started practicing law when I was I think I graduated law school at 23 or 24. So I have a long road ahead of me, plenty of time.
That's dope. That's dope. So now this idea of TurnSignl comes along, and was it presented to you? Were you part of the ideation portion of it? And being in the position you were as a successful lawyer, like what were some of your apprehensions?
Yeah, so I think Mike and Dre had been working there like as a co-founding team, and some of the other stakeholders and early investors were talking about, hey, this is the idea. And what happened, they kept calling me. And because none of them are lawyers, and they kept calling me like, hey, so if I had a lawyer in the car, what would it look like, or what would it be? And I kept asking super lawyer questions. And they're like, man, join us, help us do this, because like we didn't even think about those questions, let alone know the answers to them. And so I was like, I don't know, I'll think about it. I kept pushing it, and month over month, and this is June 2020 is when George Floyd died May of 2020, and everyone's talking about it all summer, and this is towards the end of the summer, and I'm like, but I haven't done anything. And if I have a computer science degree and a law degree, and I have people trying to build an ecosystem that I can help build, like, what am I doing? Like, everyone's like, oh, we're raising awareness. Here's the march. I was at the marches. I was at the protests. I was on that bridge on 35W when that semi rolled through. I was there. But the awareness has reached a critical mass. Like, who doesn't know the name George Floyd? What are we doing to fix it now with a solution? And so I was like, so I approached my wife, and we had 2 kids. And we had just bought a new house, and she works, and she's incredibly smart and successful in her career. I was like, babe, I'm on your insurance anyways. Like, like let me go get it. Yeah. And she, like, without hesitation, she's like, I've known you always needed to help people with your law degree, and like, I support you in doing it. So with her blessing, with her working, I was like, it made it a lot easier. And I talked to folks again like Kamal, black entrepreneurs that I knew had been successful. And I wasn't starting from the trunk of my car without being able to pay rent. So it helped me get there. So I don't like to pretend like I was living out of a shoebox or in my mom's basement. But it was. I mean, I left a very good paying job, and I was going to make by today I'd be partner at that law firm. I would have been living a very cush life, but I wouldn't have been personally fulfilled. So what's the point of it then?
And that's very important. I want to tap into that a little bit more because I think our audience needs to understand what it's like to pursue those dreams and opportunities to be personally fulfilled. We're in a time where mental health is also becoming a bigger topic, but like nobody's really doing anything about it either.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We had that's one of my biggest frustrations with our society here in America is that we talk about mental health. We have all this research and data, right, on all the things that can affect somebody, that can affect behavior. And, like, you get in the courtroom, that don't matter.
Right.
Doesn't matter that you came from the hood and you saw 3 of your homies get murdered before the age of 15.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you live in a place where there's lead in the water.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you grew up in the foster care system and never had parents. Like, all these things we have data on that we know 100% will affect the outcome of how you are if nothing's done about it. We're like, oh, we have all this data. Mental health is important, mental awareness. And then when you get in situations where you actually need that empathy for your mental health, it's not there, right?
Right.
And being personally fulfilled, especially in this time where, like us being the older millennials, right? We're the OG millennials. We're kind of in that space where we got the work ethic, but like we also were like we're doing our own thing. I'm gonna work hard, but I'm gonna work hard for me.
Yep.
Right.
We straddle that Gen X and Gen Z vibe. We have a foot on both sides of the shore.
And so now you have. So we were kind of like what I used to always say coming up was like, I'm gonna do what I have to do, so I can do what I want to do, right?
Yeah.
And now you have a lot of people who are just like, I just want to do what I want to do, and it's weighing on their mental health, not having that balance.
Yeah.
So even when you say like, I didn't like have to get it out the mud necessarily in this moment of transitioning, but there's still the mental part of it. There was still consulting with your wife. There was still making sure this was the right decision to make, and so it sounds like the ultimate catalyst was being fulfilled.
Yeah, I mean, and I could not agree more with everything you just said. Like, the mental health piece and wanting to do something to help, but also wanting to be personally fulfilled and wanting to help others is all, it's like sometimes it conflicts, sometimes it's aligned, it's hard to find where you are. And to the first point is that you just made that I agree with is, those first 6 years, I was practicing at a law firm where the last 4 years I was a law firm that was in 15 states. Several offices in California, from Chicago to New Orleans, Louisiana, up the East Coast. We had 150 attorneys, 300 employees, and I was the only black attorney in the entire organization. Also, the de facto director of diversity inclusion then, right? Yep. I was practicing law. I was defending large corporations when they get sued, like Fortune 5 companies. Like, I didn't love and enjoy that, but I was doing two things. One, I was paying off these student loans, and two, I was gaining the knowledge and tools that I could then use in my next endeavor.
Yes.
When I talk to companies about partnering with TurnSignl, I'm saying, hey, I know what it's like to be a director of diversity inclusion. I know how your structure and your pillars are set up. I know your strategic goals. I made them in my organization. I know how to practice law, and I know how to help people when they're in this car because I was a public defender when I was in law school, helping people when they're arrested when we had to go in front of a judge. Yeah. I had all this time building up teams in my law firm and working with my paralegals and my litigation team. These are all skills that I then brought to building a business with my friends, my co-founders, Mike and Dre, right? I couldn't have just done that from day one. I couldn't have graduated from St. Thomas and done my exact business. I could have been successful otherwise. I could have found a different business. I could have, started a business related to things I knew then, but I didn't have the skills that I have now because of putting in the work at the early stages, right? So, like, all of that had to be there first. And the other thing that you made me think of there is, like, from getting out the mud, I was like, when I was younger, I used to see things, like, whether it was my parents or people, like, in my community were, like, my parents struggling to pay a bill. My parents, having to when they're in a vehicle accident, it was like, oh, we have to take this money and to put it towards school tuition, not towards fixing the car. And now, right? I saw all this, and like there was so many times in my head I remember seeing that, and that was my motivation to be like, not me. Like, I'm not going to do that. Not me. Like, I won't be in that situation. I'll be able to do that. Not me. And what I learned was, and when I matured in life, I now moved from a not me to like a not we.
Yeah.
Because now I don't have those fears that like I saw, and I don't have those worries that I had that I was trying to avoid then. But now I see other people in my community having them. So now it's like I moved from not me to like not like we. We have to prevent us from having these kind of issues. And if we can build something like TurnSignl to do that, like, why wouldn't I go do it?
Yeah, definitely. And that's why we talk about community a lot here at Black Tech Talent, because, we have these voices from our experiences that allows us to speak to the culture in just ways that other people can't. And you just mentioned the car accident thing, like, I've seen that so many times.
So many times.
People get in real accidents, but instead of fixing the car or going to see a chiropractor or getting checked out, they got to catch up on bills or they got to do, take a different opportunity with that money. And one experience I had when I was young, probably 18, 19, was working at this building over north, and I was outside, and a bus crashed, right? And like everybody's running over there in the hood, and they're like trying to strategize on how to pretend like they were on that bus, so they could get like a settlement.
Yeah, right. They're like,
and like,
oh, I know what kind of check I'd get.
Yeah,
Yep.
but that was like the biggest conference. It wasn't like after the initial moment of like, is everyone okay?
Yep.
Then it was like, oh, they about to get paid, or they about to, and
Yep.
it's like, that's a cultural nuance because it's like for me, I'm like, because some people wish they were on the bus, and I'm like, you would rather put your body, your physical self in harm to potentially get a payday than to like hustle and do what you got to do.
Exactly.
And it's not really a lazy thing. It's more of a lack of abundance thinking.
I'm telling you, I have the exact same conversation. And the way I try to think back to Coach Johnny Tower, one of the University of St. Thomas basketball coach. He was my first college professor. I had psych right away. We talk about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Sometimes people that are socioeconomically that don't got the money, their needs are so immediate that like that is what you think of. When you're worried about how you're going to pay for your next meal, you aren't thinking about how you're going to build a business empire to get to generational wealth. You just have to address your immediate needs. It's like, I need the $1,500 because I have these bills. So that car crash would be nice. You aren't thinking about how could I become a lawyer to help with that car crash and to build a business that would not only help those people in the accident, but also pay all of my bills forever. And like because your needs are so immediate, you don't really think about the greater opportunities that are there.
Definitely. And going back to, what we just said about there's data, there's one thing I don't like is that we understand how things work, right? And there are people in even higher positions as far as careers or titles or finances that they understand as well, right? Because if you offered them to switch positions, they wouldn't. And that means that you're in a better position, right? And I heard a judge, and I felt bad for this guy. The judge was like, he said, there's more jobs out there now than I've ever seen. So unless you're like mentally disabled or just came out of jail, I'm not assigning public defenders.
Wild.
This guy gets on the phone, black guy. I don't know if he didn't hear the beginning or if he just didn't process what he was saying, but he's trying to impress the judge. So the judge is like, "Oh, are you at work?" And he's like, "Oh, yes, sir, I'm working." And he's like, "Oh, you work full time?" He's like, "Yep, I work full time. Just got a promotion."
No.
And he's like, "How much you making?" He's like, "Oh, I make just got promoted to like $19 an hour." He's like, "So how did you get a public defender?"
Got him.
And he got it because he just got the job. Like the case has been going on for a while.
Right.
So
I didn't have a job when I was on PD.
But it's like as a judge, you're making a lot of money. How do you think lawyers not going to start your work until you pay them? So just because you make $19 an hour doesn't mean you have $5,000 to start a year-long process. Right? That's before taxes. Like the whole system is set up for failure. So going back to people like us who are actually identifying the needs, being able to speak to the culture, understanding how the game works now, because we've been on the business side of it, but then also being able to speak to our culture and going, like, I already know how you're going to approach this, and I already know how they're going to approach this. Let's come together and, like, approach it differently so we can win, right? And that's the biggest, I think, goal that we have at Black Tech Talent, that you have at TurnSignl, and creating a community around that is what's been, extremely important. So with your platform, you've done a great job of getting the word out there and getting some press and stuff. So how do you go about kind of educating people and making them feel safe about utilizing the platform?
When we talk to the community, it's hard because half of our work is talking to law enforcement and, hey, when you see a TurnSignl bumper sticker out there, when you approach the car, you know what it means. It's kind of like when you see like a protected by Xfinity on the front yard, people know that you have, you know, the Xfinity security. We need law enforcement to see the bumper sticker in the same way, to say, oh, okay, I know what to expect when I approach this vehicle now.
Yeah.
But what we also have to tell the community is, like, it's not like we're out here lockstep with police officers and telling them how they should be interacting with you. We're really here to protect the driver's rights, right?
Right.
And so we have to educate them around that and what they should and shouldn't be doing. So even within the app, there's a Know Your Rights and Do's and Don'ts tab. So even, you know, when you're kicking it on your couch on a Saturday afternoon, you know what you should and shouldn't be doing should you be pulled over in that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, on my way here, a woman was pulled over in Brooklyn Center that pushed turn signal and needed our help, and we were there for it. Like, it happens every day. It happened today in the afternoon, and we have to be able to not only be there for them, but to help educate them before they're in that situation.
Yeah, that's great. And what was it like getting the attorneys involved and kind of having that on-call feature?
Yeah, so the attorneys being involved it's great because they come from a few different perspectives. One, they're like, hey, this is a way for me not to be looked at as an ambulance chaser anymore. No one believes that I'm trying to do good work because attorneys get a bad rap.
Yeah.
So this is me saying, hey, I'm on TurnSignl because I care. And to that point, everyone, you know, every business after the murder of George Floyd was like, how can we help? We're going to be here for the black community. We're here for the businesses, and we're rah, rah, rah. Law firms we're trying to do that really hard too, but they didn't have a way to do it.
Yeah.
I always say, you know, there's emergency medicine. When you're in an accident, you go to the ER. You don't call your primary care physician like, yo,
right.
Can I get in 2 weeks? You go to the ER. In the same way, when you're in that emergency legal situation, you can't call your lawyer if you have one. You just need someone in the moment. And so that's what TurnSignl is, right? And so lawyers love being like kind of the emergency lawyer for people in that moment too. And then third, there's just people who are like, I just want to do this from a marketing standpoint. If there's if I show and that can help you, then you will want to retain me in your lawsuit that you have, or your criminal case that you have down the road. So it's a good way just to meet face-to-face new clients, because, you know, we always TurnSignl doesn't have an A in it from a branding perspective, but also because there's a lack of access to justice for so many communities, especially communities of color. Now we can put that A into it. We can give the access to justice and give you an attorney that can help you when you need it.
Yeah, that's great. You know, like I said earlier, it's a great platform. I've had many interactions. I remember a couple of them specifically that it would have been great for. And this was really before smartphones were around, but like didn't have really the front-facing cameras yet and stuff like this. I remember a cop pulled me over. I had actually just did somebody a favor by dropping them off over north. He pulls me over like right as I go through the light turn green. I go through. He pulls me over right away. So wasn't speeding. Didn't have time to speed. He's asking me about drugs and all sorts of crazy stuff. He's asking me about my license, and I wouldn't give it to him. Right. I was like, well, you got to tell me why you pulled me over.
Mm-hmm.
And he wouldn't tell me, of course. He wouldn't give me a reason. And I'm like, well, I'm not giving it to you. He's like, well, do you have one? I'm like, yeah, I have one. I'll give it to you when you tell me why you pulled me over. So he just starts turning red. He starts cursing me out. And I'm like, this is okay. I've done this before. I said, you need some time off? Like, what? Like, we go to court, and I have a license.
Right.
But you got to tell me why you pulled me over. And so then he makes up this thing about like a license plate light or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right. So I gave it to him, and then he comes back. You know, he's still got an attitude. He hasn't run anything yet, and he's, you know, I'm like, yeah, we can. I'm like, it's a lie. He's like, I don't give a f about the law. He's like all red. He's pissed off.
He's upset.
I don't care. No, this is not a game. This is not a game. Goes and runs my stuff. At the time, I'm already living in the suburbs. I don't even live over north. No criminal record, no nothing, no speeding tickets, nothing. And he comes back, his whole voice changed. Well, I just wanted to make sure nothing was going on. And, you know, being a cop, we see all sorts of crazy stuff. And wanted to make sure you weren't, like, you know, a serial killer or, like, he's like, well, maybe that's extreme. But, you know, I just want to make sure I get home to my family. And I was like, me too.
Me too. Me too.
And then he holds my ID hostage until I agree that he was justified in pulling me over because he just wants to make it home. You know, and so that's
that validation.
Man, if TurnSignl was around back then, that would have been super fly in that moment. There was another instance where I recorded the same thing super early before people were really recording police on their phone to the point where I didn't even record his face because I didn't want to agitate him to that level. I just wanted to record the interaction. He pulls me over. There's no one on the road. It's like 11 o'clock at night. And, you know, I'm asking him how fast I was going. He won't tell me. Then he goes, I didn't clock your speed. Then he goes, is this your vehicle? And I'm like, you should know if it's my vehicle, if you ran the plates.
Right.
I didn't run the plates. I said, so you didn't clock my speed, you didn't run my plates, so what are you doing? And he's like, I'm protecting people from people like you.
Wow.
That's what he said. I still have this recording on one of my hard drives.
Wow.
And, you know, then I'm like, well, you know, all right. So then in the course of by the time I give him my stuff, he's doing the little threat, stay in the car. Did I say I was getting out the car?
Right.
We're on the freeway. So goes and runs. It still gives me a ticket. Go to court to fight it, or go to court to you know, initially dispute it. Of course, they won't let me play the recording.
Yeah.
Then I go in to speak to, you know, whoever to decide if I want to take it to court or just pay it. And when I said I wanted to take it to court, he left, and I was in there by myself.
You're kidding.
Like, left for the day. Like, everybody left. Somebody saw me on camera and sent somebody in. The moment I was like, nope, he was like, look through my stuff. He's like, well, nothing I can do for you. You can do this. And I said, oh, no, I've already recorded it. Well, you can't play that in here. You got to play that in court. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to take it to court then. He said, okay. And I sat there for like 3-4 hours.
You're kidding.
Yeah. And then that guy went, everybody went home. Somebody saw me on the camera and came in and was like, oh, you're still here? What? I said, oh, yeah, I told him I want to take it to court. And he's like, oh. And, like, had to go through this whole thing.
You're
I was like,
kidding.
Like 20 or something like that. So you know, like I said, having platforms like the one you've created is important because we go through these things. You know, often I've had, you know, after Philando was murdered, I had a cop pull me over that week at gunpoint. Asked me if I threw drugs under the seat while he was pulling me over.
Wow.
Yeah. So you know, the platforms like this are important, and I dive into these stories because now I have a voice. People are listening to what we're putting together. You know, I've won these awards. I'm held in high regard, and people have to know I've been through these situations too.
You didn't just jump into the seat that you're in now.
Yeah, you know, you've been in situations, and you're a lawyer.
Yep.
Right. And so I need people to understand that these things and the solutions that we're creating for our people go back to the statement I made earlier about having that cultural understanding and nuance and being able to take our experience with, whether it's with corporate, whether it's with law, whether it's with financial, and then mirroring that with our culture and being able to create something great and create our own solutions for ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm there. I have been pulled over 12 times in my life, and I've never received a ticket. So I either need to be a case study on the best talker in the world, or why I've been pulled over so many times without legitimate reason or a reason enough to give a ticket. And it's real. And so I've always said, especially, and, you know, a vast majority of those were before I was a lawyer. And since I've been a lawyer, the interactions have been even more different, right? I've been pulled over out of the car. I've been asked to do the field sobriety test. I've been told that if I drive this car, I'm going to be pulled over every time because of where I'm coming from and what I look like. And that officer was genuinely trying to help me. She was like, let me put you on game. Like, if you're driving this car and you look like you're going to get pulled over every time, so you got to slow down. She was genuinely trying to help, but not appreciating in that moment that she's admitting what's wrong with the larger system, right? And so, and again, that's exactly right. That's why we have the background and understanding and experiences to be the ones to build it. I can't tell you how many times now I hear, like, this is such a great idea. Like, why hasn't this been done yet? It's because of all lawyers in the country, over all the time, we've never risen above about 5% of all lawyers are black, right? And then you tie in the computer science aspect, and then you tie in kind of the business background aspect. It's just we haven't had the people come together to want to build something yet because they haven't had those lived experiences.
Exactly.
And now we have a group that has. So
that's great.
Here we are.
That's great. So talking about community, one thing that, you know, I've dealt with when talking to investors or pitch competitions and stuff like that is they don't get the point of how we build communities or the cultural nuances to those communities, the music, the food, the locations we like, these things and how those things actually translate into better business, better relationships, long-term results. And so, I've known you for a few years now. You've been to a few of our different events and actually have been able to tap into our community. So tell me, like, kind of what that's been like for you and how you would describe the importance of building the communities that we're building.
It's really important, and the thing is, I agree that sometimes people who are not in the initial building of that community or from that community don't appreciate it. A good analogy is like it's like European like fashion.
Yeah,
it's like right now, like people will laugh at it, like, oh, this is wild. I can't believe they're wearing that. And guess what? 10 years from now, it's here, and that's what we're doing. And what we are building in like the ecosystem you've built is the same thing where people are like, oh, I'm not really sure. I haven't seen that before. I'm not familiar with it, and it's outside of what I do. It's like, but guess what? Just like everything else, it's gonna follow, and you'll be right on board in a few years. I mean, that's what I say about TurnSignl. I always say TurnSignl is like rap music. It's like, oh yeah, it started for us, but I'm gonna be on every mainstream radio station real quick here because everyone else is gonna adopt what we've built because they see the value in it. It's not just people of color that are worried when they're pulled over or don't know what to do when they're in an accident. But we started it because we have the most acute fear in these situations. And so now we'll see that it's going to grow more and more. And I see the same thing with the community you all are building with, whether it's the summit you guys are putting on or the pitch competitions. What is happening is people are saying, oh, these black businesses aren't just for black people. They're growing and going to affect the entire ecosystem. I just didn't know it yet, is what people are saying.
Exactly.
Right? But you got to get them in there first, and that's half the battle. It's like you whether it's an investor or whatever, it's just you have to get them to see, oh, wow, this is so much bigger than just this niche community, and it can affect so much more. And once they do, the doors, are busted wide open.
Exactly. And we have the most success with those individuals and those allies, we'll call them, that actually show up and participate because they're like, oh, this is super dope. Met a lot of people that I would, like our last event. We just did a metaverse event. And somebody came, he's like, I go to a lot of networking events. He's a recruiter. He's like, I go to a lot of networking events, and it's like all the same people in this tech and startup ecosystem. He was like, I met all new people tonight. So it's that ability to come into a room, be comfortable, and be yourself with other people that are being themselves and enjoy the culture and the experience and then learn from it and to be able to take that back to your group of people and be like, hey, there's something cool going on over here. We need to support this. We need to foster it. We need to invest in it. But there are a lot of people who are not going to take that step to be like, I'm going to participate in it. There are even people who have supported financially
but won't come.
Like, haven't shown up. And it's like, and I call them out like, what's up? Why you didn't, come through? You missed a major opportunity because what's happening is you become, in our culture, we call it the plug. If you're from one of these big companies and you're there and you're the hiring manager, you're going to get so much love because they're like, okay, now I feel like I know who I'm applying with. Now I feel like I can add you on LinkedIn and like have an in because we met and had a great conversation, whatever it may be. And that's the magic that happens at all of our events. And also for them, they get to see who's ready now, who could be groomed for the future, like what's going on, or even with our Tech Fest. Like when Care 11 came, they were like, who should we feature? And I'm like, all the black founders. Right?
Put them on, right.
And so for a lot of people.
Who am I cheering for? Everybody black. Issa Rae, right.
So it's like, to for some of them, that was their first piece of like major press as well, to be highlighted in that. And so that's the ecosystem that we're creating where people wouldn't have even known about some of those businesses had they not come out and participated and been a part of what we're building and had enough curiosity to like come out and be a part of that. You won our pitch competition. You know what I'm saying? Which was super dope to see. And like I said, to see the growth you've had from then till now it's been amazing.
And that was a part of those stepping stones in getting there. And to that point of like when those businesses, whether they're just writing a check or they're showing up or doing more, what I think they need to understand and appreciate is we see that in the community. I know every law firm that writes the check. I know every law firm that writes a check and shows up to the networking event, and I know every law firm that writes a check, shows up to the event, and hires the people. And I know where those fall on that rank. And guess what? that one that does all three, that's the first one I'm going to, right?
Exactly.
And that is what they don't appreciate is like, I know where I'm celebrated, not tolerated, and I'll start there. And I think businesses are just starting to see that more and more now, where like writing the check ain't cutting it. Like you have to show up, you have to be there, and then after you're there, you have to follow up with those people, and you have to work with those people.
Yeah.
That's what we want to see, right? It's not just writing the check anymore.
Yeah, especially to be sustainable.
Yep.
If we want this, and I've had some really great conversations over the last couple of weeks with new clientele we've brought on that's the conversation they're even presenting.
Yep.
Where they're like, hey, of course we want to utilize you for recruiting, and we would love to sponsor some of your events, but like, how do we do even more?
We're looking for a holistic approach.
Yeah, we're looking like you talk about the pipeline, like we want to be a part of that, and that's the important thing because, like I said, we've had conversations where it is literally like we're just hiring for 10 people right now. Can you service that right now, right? Yep. And whether we can or can't, depending on what they need and how quick they're looking to hire. A lot of times, what's happening is it's not a intentional. We're hiring diverse. It's just like we're just trying to hire some people, and if you can do it, we'll do it.
We'll do it, right?
And it's like, good.
5 minutes.
Okay, and it's like it's good that we're getting those calls, right? It's better than not getting any calls, but like it's great that now people are literally like, hey, we want to hire now, but we also understand that for this to be sustainable is a pipeline thing, and we understand that you're addressing that with the things you're creating, and we want to be a part of that story.
Yeah, and that's the difference. I hear so much whenever you're working in art, kind of doing well by doing good. People are like, oh, are you a nonprofit? It's like, no, I'm a business. We aren't accepting donations. We're building a repeatable business model that can grow and sustain our business and the community. And so just writing the check is what you do when you're donating to some organization that's doing good work, and that's great.
Yeah.
But I'm building a repeatable business that can grow and help more people the more we grow. So why don't you partner with us to help us get to that next step? And it'll come back and feed back into the ecosystem that you're trying to help us build. It's so much like the nonprofit, like, are you a nonprofit thing it gets frustrating sometimes.
We used to get that a lot. We would get people who wouldn't even ask us; they would just assume that we were a nonprofit. And like you said, there's nothing wrong with nonprofits. Nothing wrong with people donating to nonprofits. But the biggest trick I'll say people try to, convince people of is like, oh, well, if it's a nonprofit, it's like a tax write-off. Doing business is a tax write-off too.
Right. Yeah, right.
If you're contracting with us to recruit, that's the cost of doing business.
Right.
If you're using us to get to help you with your messaging to the Black community, that's a write-off. If you're buying a booth at one of our events as a vendor, that's a write-off as well.
Right,
so
your marketing, this is PR, this is everything.
It's all write-off. So if we go to lunch just to talk about it, it's a write-off. So we don't have to be a nonprofit for them to get the same benefits. No. But yeah, it's that's an interesting thing. But luckily, we've both grown to a level where we're getting that visibility, and now people are understanding what we're trying to do and taking it serious, and we're having progress in that. So we're getting to the end of our session here. Is there any last things you want to shout out or let people know just about the work you're doing?
TurnSignl is live in Minnesota, Georgia, and California. If you're a business looking to provide it to the community or to your employees, you provide them health and dental benefits and sometimes pet insurance. The least you can do is provide them a benefit to make sure they feel safe driving to or from work or their kids to basketball tournament on the weekend. So reach out to us, organizations big and small, and individuals. Just make sure you have TurnSignl to give you peace of mind when you're out driving.
Yes, sir. I love
Appreciate it. And thank you for, the pitch competition, for the early conversations that we had about, making the jump and doing this. We wouldn't be here without, your guidance as well and your platform. That. So thank you for that. Appreciate
it. With that said, that's another successful episode of BTT Discussions. Thank you, Jazz, for coming through. Check out TurnSignl, and we're out. This episode is brought to you by Sunrise Banks and Lifetime.